This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 507, part 2, entitled Femimafia, blocking of masculist penetration of the mainstream media. Carrying straight on. They just don't see how sexist and hypocritical they are being, since to them, in their minds, they are merely stopping more male abuse of women. Masculist ideas to them are simply more proof that men oppress women, since they interpret masculist criticisms of women as just more misogyny. So how are we masculists ever going to get our masculist ideas across to the general public when we are so systematically blocked by the hated Femimafia? This is a critical question, since it is now very much the key emphasis amongst the masculists, since masculist ideas are now ripe, they have matured and are ready to be spread, so that billions with a B of men can be liberated from decades of man's slavery at the hands of fluffy women who have not bothered to fip up and expect to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man. So just how do masculists get their message across to the masses, to the general public? How to answer this critical and timely question? Here is my suggestion. Big ideas usually get launched in the universities, so I suggest masculists should target them by going to public lectures and making short soundbite statements expressing masculist ideas, and to do this in sufficient numbers so that everyone of both sexes becomes increasingly aware of the fact that women no longer have a monopoly over gender politics and that there is now a male presence on the gender political stage. For example, say you're at a university public lecture where some female speaker makes a snide remark, some misandrous quip. Then you as a masculist can rise to your feet and say something like the following. Quote, "If you feel you have the right as a feminist to piss on men, then I as a masculist will do the same to women, since you women oppress men vastly more than vice versa, with your many decades-lasting gender crimes against men. Even rape is small beer in comparison to women's decades-lasting manslaving parasitism of men, women's paternity fraud, women's pill lying, women's hypocritical opposition to the legislation of the paternity rejection right, especially given that you women have the maternity rejection right. We masculists want the creation of GECs, that's gender equality committees, in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are handled equally. The masculist half will push for the legislation of the OPTAB, that's obligatory paternity testing at birth, that will combat paternity fraud, where the husband is not the father, and the legislation of the paternity rejection right, to combat pill lying. The fact that you women have the mara and we men don't have the para is the most blatant example of sexual discrimination that exists, and it's not against women but against men. You women who remain monoconscious feminists will lose your monoconscious male feminist boyfriends in your millions when we masculists convert them into biconscious masculists. That is, they have their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, who then see you as MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, who dogmatically insist that gender oppression is a one-way street, whereas in reality you women oppress men worse. Masculists see fluffies, that is traditional women who don't fib up, that is don't become fips, as manslavers and hence as vermin to be wiped out by being totally ignored by masculists, who will be most men in time as masculist ideas spread across the planet. So it's in your feminist self-interest to become bi-conscious faster than your monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, or you will run a serious risk that he will dump you for being an MFB. He will see you as a sexist, hypocritical bigot, become disgusted with you and dump you. millions of you. So I suggest you bother to do some homework on what masculism is all about before you are sent by your now freshly minted bi-conscious ex-boyfriends to rot on the shelf. End quote. As masculist speeches like the above take place many times on campuses all over the world, sooner or later media journalists will get the message and broadcast it, writing major pieces on the masculist philosophy that is so profoundly influencing the minds of millions of young men, causing millions of young women to not receive the sperm of their boyfriends. Why not? Why are so many young women now panicking that they truly are not going to have a baby? What's going on with men? Why are they rejecting marriage and paternity in such numbers? What is this masculism they keep talking about? Thus, sooner or later, female journalists, and maybe even a few male journalists, will take up the masculist torch and run with it in their media outlets, thus pushing masculist ideas so that eventually masculism becomes political, so that the masculists see the establishment of the GECs, that's gender equality committees, they so want. There are other ways to spread masculist ideas, of course. One is via word of mouth. One masculist can influence the minds of dozens of other men just by talking to them. Another tactic is for masculists to reject their monoconscious girlfriends if their girlfriends remain monoconscious feminists, and hence are seen by their masculist boyfriends to be MFBs, a term of real abuse used by masculists to utterly dice those types of feminists they despise and aim to get rid of by punishing them severely, by causing them to be manless. Since 99.5% of women are heterosexual, stripping MFBs of their men will be painful indeed for these women. Thus, masculists target the monoconscious male feminist boyfriends of monoconscious feminists, seeing this as a very effective means to punish them, and to punish them deeply. Imagine a few years from now what it will be like once nearly all senior high school male students have absorbed masculist ideas and project them onto their female classmates. Those female classmates who choose to become fluffy crappers, that is, choosing to study fluffy crap majors, that will cause them to become fluffies as adults, will be utterly rejected by their male classmates, both socially and sexually, which will be extremely painful for them. Thus, we can expect young women to pour into STEM fields and to study the professions at college, instead of today's masculist estimated 80% of young women choosing to study fluffy crap majors. So, even if the Femimafia continue to hold the monoconscious feminist media fort for a decade longer, then given the exponential rise of the masculists and MGTOW movements, we can expect to see tremendous moral pressure being applied to young fluffies in high schools, forcing them to fib up. When there are millions of such morally pressured fluffies, there will be a market for women's magazines to write about the issue, asking why young men reject them and often even spit in their faces, calling them fluffy, man-slaving parasites. So one way or another, masculist and MGTOW ideas will be transmitted to the high schools and universities, either until sooner or later the mainstream media is forced to take them up and sow the seeds of masculist thinking in the minds of the masses, the millions, and later the billions. Personally, I believe masculist ideas will change society and history as profoundly as feminist ideas have already. Feminist careerism frees men from decades of man-slavery to women. The time is now ripe for masculists to put heavy moral pressure on young women to fib up and pull their financial weight. Thanks to men, women have a life expectancy of 85 years and a career window of half a century, so have a powerful moral duty to get off their fat parasitic asses and fib up, or be severely punished by men by not getting one. We men have the financial power, so we're in a position to force women to grow up, to fib up, to take full responsibility for their own lives and not expect, fluffy style, to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man. Thanks to the Masculist and MGTOW movements, the supply of gullible, ignorant, manslavable men is drying up, forcing women to fip up or to rot on the shelf. I suspect that these kinds of masculist messages will be commonplace in the high schools and colleges within a mere 5 years. So we can then expect the cries of pain from millions of young women as they are rejected socially and sexually by millions of young men for continuing to be monoconscious feminists. Increasingly, bi-conscious masculists, who will be most men by then, will not tolerate MFBs and will spit at them, casting them out of society, putting enormous moral pressure on them to fib up and become bi-conscious, or they will become cat ladies, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at. Cheers, Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 500 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.